Welcome to Beerstories from Beerstory Brewhouse. This is a Christmas edition of Grain to Glass. It's a Belgian Dubbel, and you can find the recipe and everything right down here, and I'll walk you through it as well. Like I said, this is a Belgian Dubbel that I made. Actually made this last year for Christmas, so it was good then. It has been conditioning now for a year, and now it's better. So if you brew it, leave a batch of beer for next year. It's a Belgian Dubbel, pretty traditional actually, with some spices. So let's dive into it. As you can see here, I named it Dubbel Christmas. I don't think that's original, but it is what it is. It is a Dubbel. It's a Belgian style beer, a very typical Belgian style beer. If we go over the vitals first, it's 8.1 ABV, and I made it that strong because I actually wanted to save it for this year. So I think beers above 8% ABV is better for long lagering or conditioning, storing for up to a year or 2 years actually. So if I have to be honest, I actually drank 2/3 of them last year, so I have about 6 bottles left, I think, just enough for Christmas Eve. But it's a pretty strong beer. Belgian Dubbel is normally a strong beer, but not, it depends. So this is the kind of the upper range of a Belgian Dubbel, and as you can see here, normally it's just about 6 to 7.6 ABV. Original gravity, of course, it's pretty high as well. 1073. Final gravity, that's actually pretty low, 1011. It could have been lower, but yeah, I think this beer deserves. It is a typical dry Belgian beer, but it still has some sweetness to it, and I think that's good for along with the Christmas food, because it's so fat and rich, so it complements some of the flavors by being a little sweet too. But it's not a sweet beer, don't get me wrong. EBC 60, as you can see, is pretty dark. It's actually it's a beautiful clear beer. When the foam goes away, I will actually try and shoot the table underneath here. But it's a clear beer. It's a dark beer, and it's actually, it has this beautiful red hue. And that's kind of Christmas-like as well, I think. IBUs, 26. It's not that bitter, but the spices in there makes up for the lack of bitterness, I think. So that's also where some of the sweetness comes from. But it's well balanced, I'll tell you that. As you can see down here on the BU-GU ratio, it's in the upper range. So that means that it's actually more bitter than a traditional Dubbel. So, but I think I like this beer style that way. If it gets too sweet, it gets too much. And along with the Christmas food, it gets way too much. So it's not a bitter beer, it's well balanced. The spices is also well balanced, and it really complements and plays well with the Christmas food. Yeah, that was the vitals. I boiled it for an hour. This was a batch for 25 liters, so about 6 gallons. Yeah, so diving right into all the fermentables. It's 60% pale ale. And I think it's a pretty traditional Dubbel. And I'm not going overboard with anything. So 60% pale ale, 13% of Munich malt, light Munich malt, only the 17 EBC one. Then I got almost 7% of candy syrup, D180. So that's not a lot. And if I added, traditionally you would probably add more candy syrup to this. And that would also bring the final gravity lower and make it drier. But I like it this way. And then I got some crystal malts, pretty dark one, 215 EBC, also 7%. Then I got about 5.5% aromatic malts, just to give it a lot of nutty, toffee, yeah, that Belgian style aromatic feel of a double. That's pretty much the aromatic malts and the Cara malts that does that. So the next one is 4% Cara Munich 3. And then also Special B, about 3.5%. And that's also a very typical Belgian malt. So if you want to play around here with anything, play around with the last three. But I wouldn't recommend that. This beer is very, very balanced. For hops, I kind of went pretty traditional here, I think, as well, with some noble hops. Noble just sounds Christmassy to me, so you could have gone with English hops as well. For the bittering edition, 60 minutes, I added 30 grams of Styrian Goldings, equivalent to 15, almost 16 IBUs. At 15 minutes left of the boil, I added Styrian Goldings as well, about 5% IBU or 20 grams. Also at 15 minutes left, I added SARS at 2.2 IBUs, 10 grams. And then 5 minutes left of the boil, I added 20 grams of SARS, 1.7 IBUs. And then 2 minutes left of the boil, I added SARS again, 20 grams, 0.7 IBUs. And that's the hop profile in this. It makes it kind of herbal, a little bit earthy. And I think that plays very well up against the spice in this and also the malt bill or the grain bill. It just works, these earthy herbal kind of spice notes. They work very well with the caramel and the Special B especially, and the aromatic malts. So yeah, I wouldn't change anything there either. The only thing I actually wanted to change in this was a spice. I think I made 5 different kind of spice tea out of spices, and I went with this one. This one is I added the spice with 15 minutes left of the boil, and I added 15 grams of dried blackberry, 15 grams of licorice root, some orange peel, some sweet orange peel, dried orange peel. No, this was fresh. Sorry, this was fresh orange peel, actually, from one whole orange. And then I added 3 grams of clove. And here's what I would change if I brewed it again. I would leave out the clove. If you like clove flavors in your Belgian beers, you should add it. You could also just use puff positive yeast, which I didn't. Puff positive means is phenolic or flavor positive, and that will give you clove flavors from the yeast. So I would actually leave out the clove and decide if I want that flavor in the beer by adding the right yeast. If I wanted the clove flavor, I would be using the Belgian 134 instead from Fermentation. But I didn't use it in this one, and that's why I added the clove. But next time I would just leave it out, because the other things, they play so well together that it's just a beautiful beer. It is also a beautiful beer now. I really like it, but I will leave out the clove. Yeah, and for watering agents or minerals, I just added some canning salt, actually, 3 grams. And that was because I didn't use my RO water, but But I have a water profile here. You can see calcium about 100, magnesium about 10, sodium about 50, chlorides about just about 100, 95, and sulfate is almost about 90. So this is just a balanced water profile with focus on just having some minerals in there. If you wanted to accentuate the malts, you would just go for higher chloride. But I think this worked really, really well, so I wouldn't change that actually. For the yeast, I chose to use Fermentis Belgian strain called 256. I added 3 packages of that, and that was just to it's a Belgian yeast, so it's fruity. It got that Belgian vibe, but it's not a positive yeast, so it won't make any phenolic off flavors, and that's equivalent to spice. So this yeast doesn't really contribute with any spice. It's just that it gives you that dried black fruits like raisins and plum and stuff like that. So I think that yeast works perfect with this beer. It's just what I wanted. And as I said, the only thing I wanted to change if I were to brew it again was not adding clove. That was my plan last year, but tasting it now, it works. Maybe I would add again. I really don't know. I made a step mash. So I had a protein rest at 52 for 15 minutes, a beta rest at 63 for 50 minutes, and then an alpha rest at 67 for 25 minutes, and then a mash out just 10 to 15 minutes at 78. And the step mash is, the protein, I wanted to break down all the proteins just to give it a better head, but also to make it just clear and a little thinner body. So you could just use 65 as well. I think it would probably be the same beer, but the protein rest here is pretty important. And then I let it ferment for 7 days at 19 degrees Celsius, and then ramped it up to 21 degrees Celsius and leave it in there for another 14 days just to clean up and just to mature a bit before I bottle it. And then I carbonated with sugar. It's higher carbonated than my usual beers are. And that's, again, a pretty important thing here. Belgian beers are often carbonated higher, about volumes of CO2 is about 3. And that's pretty important for a beer that you have to drink along with fatty and rich food. Because the carbonation is actually, all the bubbles on your tongue, on your palate, is actually cleansing your palate and kind of resetting everything in your mouth. So you can actually taste the food better, but you can also taste the beer better. And that's why this style of beer really, really works well with Christmas food, because it improves both the beer and the food. And if you have any questions for this recipe, you should of course just contact me. You should drink this beer at about 8 to 10 degrees Celsius. Fahrenheit will be somewhere here. So don't drink it right out of the fridge. You should actually let it warm up. You can let it warm up in your glass if you have a glass like this. But I really recommend you to take it out of the fridge an hour before you drink it. And then it will really work perfectly. So diving in for just for the looks of it, it's so clear, and I can see all the bubbles in here. It's a beautiful beer. It's kind of a brown red color, and I can see the stripes down here. I can't really show you because it still has a good head on it, even though it's been 15 minutes since I poured it. But it's a beautiful beer. Really, it is. Going in for aroma. So the first thing I get is this malty breadiness from the aromatic malts. I also get a little bit of dried fruit, and then the spice. I get the clove. I get a little bit of orange peel. You can't really taste the blackberries in here or the licorice root. It's just kind of building up the ground flavor. So if you think of the flavors are kind of layered, it's kind of in the, if you think of a pyramid, you got all the malts and the yeast down here. And on top you got the spices. And right there on top somewhere is just somewhere right on the top, you got this, you got the orange peel, you got the bitterness from the orange peel. But I don't really get the dried blackberries. Maybe there's a little bit of tartness that could be from there, that could also be from the orange peel. But I remember when I did the spiced tea, the blackberries really made a difference. But I didn't want to overdo it, because in some of the samples where I added more, it got really pungent. So yeah, I wouldn't change that in here. If you can't get hold of them, you can leave them out, I think. But I think they are adding something. Yeah, just something. So the licorice root, you get a hint of licorice in this, and I think it's probably more from the licorice root than any of the malts. But it's such a balanced beer that you get this huge flavor. But it's hard to really tell that this is from that, this is from this is from there. It just is so balanced that it's really hard to say, actually. And like I said before, you have this pyramid of flavors, and the base is kind of this. Yeah, you get something from Munich malts, but it's more like the caramel, the aromatic malts, and the special B, and also the caramel Munich. You get this really nice, bready, nutty, dried fruit, and that's probably along with the yeast. Yeah, and then the spice on top. I think it's a very well-balanced Christmas beer, and it works so good with the Christmas dinner. This fatty, rich, full-flavored food. This matches that completely and perfectly. It makes the food better, and the food makes the beer better. So they really complement each other, and just, I think it's so much better than drinking wine for Christmas. So I actually got a little bit in Christmas mood, and I'm really looking forward for Christmas now, for the food anyway, just to have this beer again with the food, because yeah, that was good. I guess that was it. Yeah, this is my Christmas beer. If you have any questions about it, write to me. Other than that, well, just try it out and have a happy brewing out there.